So, my name is Marissa Ditkowsky. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with dark hair that's pulled back and glasses. I am the volunteer executive director of the National Disabled Legal Professionals Association. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited for this panel. Of a bunch of rock stars who work in legal services. This is a part of our career exploration series where we are delving into just about every type of legal job that you can imagine to discuss navigating the profession and these different types of jobs with a disability. Importantly for this panel, my full-time job is a legal services attorney at a nonprofit called SEDEC DC. So I am really excited for this conversation, and I am going to allow the panelists to introduce themselves. Before I do that, just a few housekeeping notes. For accessibility, we have captions. If you hit the show captions button, you should be able to view them. We also have an ASL interpreter. If you are not a panelist or speaking, we just request that you remain camera off for access. We request that panelists, before speaking, just kindly say their name for access so folks know who's talking. And if folks could also try to keep it relatively slow for the interpreter and captioner, that would be awesome. And I will also put in the chat the information about captions. Um, but let me allow our panelists to introduce themselves. Virginia, I will start with you.
Thanks, Marissa. Hi, everyone. I'm Virginia Knowlton Marcus, and I work as the CEO at Disability Rights North Carolina. We are the protection and advocacy organization charged with advancing the civil rights of people with all types of disabilities of any age throughout the state of North Carolina. I'm a person with lived experience, and I'm a woman, white woman with a gray streak in my brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a shirt that's black, green, and blue. And my background is the Disability Rights North Carolina logo and the number to the Capitol switchboard with a message asking people to call their senators and representative and say no cuts to Medicaid.
Thank you. Florence.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Florence Otaigbe. I am a Black woman with darkish brown / black hair, wearing a headband, and my hair is pulled back. I have a Zoom background of like a tan color and like a lamp and a bit of a flower peeking out. And I'm wearing a green quarter zip right now. I am an immigration attorney, and my career has mostly been in the public interest and legal services space. It's a very difficult time right now, so I am kind of in between many things.
Thank you. And Florence is one of our fabulous Indulpa volunteers as well. Liv.
Hi, I'm Liv. I'm a staff attorney at the Consumer Unit at Legal Assistance of Western New York, or Law New York for short. I am white. I've got short hair that's flipping out like an anime protagonist, hopefully, and I'm wearing glasses. I'm in a dubious lighting home office situation, and I'm based out of Rochester, New York.
Thank you, everybody. So our first question here is, can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your career, and how you got to where you are today? I don't know who wants to start, but
I guess I can start because it's kind of short. I graduated from law school in May 2020. So I have been in my postgraduate career for a little over 4 years now. I got admitted as an attorney in June 2021. So my trajectory has been impacted by just how COVID, or the start of COVID rather, affected uh, the bar exam, bar admission, and things like that. But I was able to start out as a law grad at a Catholic Charities organization in New York. And so that was good, at least, to be able to start working not too long after I graduated. And then I was a law grad for like almost a year and some change while waiting for admission. And since being admitted, I have been a practicing immigration attorney. Most recently, I was working with Afghan parolees who were evacuated here after, sorry, each second. The Taliban took over the Afghan government, and so they were brought here, and then they were given what's called humanitarian parole. And so the focus of my work was providing legal services to assist with obtaining some form of permanent status. And I was doing that work for the past 2 years, and yeah, brings me to today.
Thank you. Who wants to go next?
I can go ahead. That's all right. This is Liv. So I went to the University of Texas School of Law, graduated in 2021. And then after that, I worked for a state politician. I focused on business and commerce and natural resources and economic development. After that, I worked at a state agency with utilities before leaving Texas and coming to Rochester, New York for this consumer job that I absolutely love. And nowadays I get to sue creditors, and there is nothing more satisfying.
Team consumer. Okay, Virginia.
My story goes back a little ways. I went to law school at University of California, Davis. I was going to law school full-time and working part-time at the state's Civil Rights Enforcement Agency under an administration that was quite hostile to civil rights. I was struggling. My mental health was not in a healthy place. And I luckily found my way to what is now Disability Rights California, by talking to a friend who let me know that they were looking for law clerks. So I called up the managing attorney of the Sacramento office that day, and 2 weeks later, I found my tribe. I just felt like that was where I belonged from Jump Street. I found language for what was happening with me. That's where I learned about reasonable accommodations, not law school. And so I've really never looked back. So I worked there for a little over 10 years. When I left, I was director of public policy, and ironically, very concerned about the Medicaid cuts that were looming at the federal level. So I wanted to do a reconnaissance mission and just spend a year on the Hill, getting to know the players and the leverage point. So I applied for a Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Fellowship, and I got the fellowship, but after that, I was convinced by the foundation to take the executive director position. So I left California and made the move to the East Coast. It was a really good experience, interesting experience. I got to do some international development, disability development work, but I found that my approach to disability rights is grounded in human rights. I'm fighting for my own life. And if the foundation took, I felt a more paternalistic view toward the issues. So I jumped off and was the executive director of Disability Rights Maryland in Baltimore for 11 years. I briefly went back to California. I took the director of legal advocacy position. And I was there for about a year and a half, and I realized California had changed, I had changed, and I was looking for another opportunity. I came to Disability Rights North Carolina as the CEO in September of 2018, just in time for Hurricane Florence to devastate parts of the eastern part of the state. That's my story.
Thank you. How does your disability influence the work that you do?
Well, mine is quick. Like I said, I'm fighting for my own life, and the disability rights is there's not a lot of space between who I am and what I do for work.
Yeah,
This is
absolutely. Go ahead, Liv.
this is Liv. So a lot of our clients, there's a really large overlap between vulnerable populations and people who need legal aid. So many of our clients are on like receiving disability assistance, or they are dealing with some sort of disability related situation. And it allows me to, in a non-judgmental way, communicate with them, where maybe if they self-disclose that they have a disability and it seems like there might be a cognitive argument, or if I can somehow argue that this debt, she wasn't in the right mind to understand it, I might say, okay, I have days where occasionally due to painkillers, like I'm not dumb, but this medication can really make you feel foggy. It's awful. And that can sometimes build the rapport where they'll disclose that yes, they actually genuinely just didn't understand they were dealing with XYZ. I mean, folks don't want to feel stupid in front of attorneys. There's this perception that we're all super smart, and they're not. And just kind of leveling the playing field and helping build rapport is where I use it the most.
Florence?
Yeah, this is Florence. So for me, uh, the last several years, it's affected me pretty personally in terms of my role as an employee in an organization, because I have needed accommodations or what have you, and in order to be able to do my work. And like that has always been this sort of hill to climb, for lack of a better phrase, because it starts this process and then it feels like once you've started this discussion, like you don't know how it's going to go and if you will get what you actually need, especially when I was in situations where I'd already been at the place for a while. And then the needs for certain things came into play. At my most recent job, I had a big ankle surgery at one point, and I needed to take short-term leave, and just having to navigate that whole process. I ended up doing it mostly like on my own, trying to figure it out. I wasn't getting much information or support from, you know, uh, like my supervisors and HR and things like that. So it's almost gotten to the point where like I'm at odds with myself sometimes because I'm trying to make sure I have what I need to be able to do my work, and then my work is still there, but then I don't have what I need or the energy to do it. And so it's really complicated things for me a lot in recent years. So I'll stop there.
I think that kind of segues really well. This is Marissa, into the next question, which is have you had to navigate the accommodations process in your legal services roles? And, can you tell us about it? In Florence, you've told us a little bit, but Virginia and Liv, I don't know if you have anything you want to talk about there.
This is Liv. So when I first onboarded at Law New York about a year ago, I think one of the first days I texted Marissa going, hey, they didn't ask me about what accommodations I need. They don't know the paperwork. They don't have the paperwork necessary for getting accommodations. And I was a little concerned that that meant that my workplace maybe wasn't too concerned themselves about accommodations, but I brought it to their attention, and not only did I get the paperwork within a day, everyone's been very respectful. I brought up that we should be having accommodations paperwork and examples of reasonable accommodations just for accessibility purposes for everyone during onboarding and in our staff resources. And it took maybe 2 months before I was meeting with the executive director about that, and they incorporated it. So I also, I just haven't had any issues here. Past roles, not the case. Here, no.
This is Marissa. We love positive experiences. Virginia, do you have anything to add?
Sure, this is Virginia. Of course, I've seen it from both sides. And I was very lucky coming up in Disability Rights California, because the accommodation that I most needed was a flexible work schedule, and that was no problem at all. With my supervisor, there were some other staff as I was coming up through the ranks that needed more accommodations, like things that would cost the organization money. And it's a large organization, could be a little more bureaucratic than a small nonprofit. It's a large nonprofit, like hundreds of employees. And so I would coach other folks about how to get what they needed. Now, you know, our shop, I mean, we offer a flexible work schedule. It's just like everybody just gets that. They don't really have to ask for that. And it works really well for our organization. And I actually like the interactive process, because I mean, I feel like I understand what the law intended. It's really clunky and hard on disabled people, I think, in some organizations that, do I want to say, don't get it. But to me, it's always like an interesting thing to figure out, what's going to work for people. So, and I think that's what the law intended, is that two reasonable people would sit down and figure out what's going to work. I wish it worked that way in actual practice more often.
This is Marissa. I think we can all agree on that. One thing that I think people assume is that if you're in a legal services role in, an organization that is aimed to help people, especially disability rights roles, that, you're not going to encounter ableism, you're not going to have any issues. Um, have any of you ever encountered ableism in your workplaces? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
I can. Oh, Liv, where you gonna go?
Oh, go ahead, Florence. I want to hear
Okay.
it.
Yeah, this is Florence. So I mean, yes, I've experienced it in the workplace, and in very overt ways, but then also in very like microaggression type ways, and um, it can definitely be hard when you are in a situation where you feel like maybe you're the only one who like quote unquote cares. But there was a situation where our office wanted to do some sort of like staff retreat thing. And I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey, which I forgot to mention. And they had it all planned out where it was going to be people like just gallivanting all over town and going to different Jersey government agencies to like see them firsthand and get a feel for how it works, like as if you were the client, quote unquote. And when I first heard about it, I was like, hey, remember me over here who like can't really walk that far? That's not going to work. And they just were like, oh, well, we thought this would be great for everybody. And I was like, well, not me. So that's not everybody. But after I like started having those conversations with them, then it turned out that other people, for whatever reasons, had reservations about this adventure throughout Jersey City. So I don't know if those were for, disability reasons or not, but like either way, it felt good that at least my just talking about what I needed, like promoted the managers to make a change about something that really just on its face is like not accessible, like in general. So that was something.
Thank you.
This is Liv. So I, out of law school, I wasn't sure if I could get a job because I knew that I needed a flexible schedule. I knew I needed to be able to work from homes at times. I worked for a politician and I chose this politician because they advertised themselves as a disability rights champion. And I thought disability rights champion equates an employer who will get it. Unfortunately, 2 years down the line, I was working hours that were exhausting me. I had to reduce my medication in order to be able to be awake to meet the demands of my job. And after I quit, after some of the worst pain that I've had in years, I quit and I went to go work for a different state agency. That state politician took it quite badly and had the state director of that agency fire me despite saying that I was doing a good job because I was clearly lying about my medical reasons needing to quit. So that's at the EEOC. We'll see how that goes. And that's the main impetus of me moving to Rochester. My workplace here, I only work 35 hours a week and it's hybrid remote. It's fantastic.
We're so glad. This is Marissa. We're so glad that things are better now. Virginia.
Thanks. This is Virginia. I haven't really had to contend with hardcore ableism. It's more like just ignorance from people who were new, because sometimes people want to do civil rights work, but they're really sort of new to disability. And so you just have to learn to be, you just get better at calling people in, because it's not malicious. So you have to learn to just explain things to people in a way that won't embarrass them.
Yeah, this is Marissa. I think that's a skill that unfortunately many of us have to uh contend with and use. How does your organization foster access and inclusion for workers? And what are the ways that it can improve?
Well, this is Virginia. We can always improve, and we're always seeking to improve. But we start from the very beginning to address the problem I just described, where people might be new to disability. So we have a pretty thorough orientation. We're probably going to have to change it depending on what happens with the changes under the current federal administration. When I got to Disability Rights NC, almost 100% of our funding was federal grants. I've worked really hard to change that, but we're still at 70%. So the bulk of our funding is federal. But one of the things that we do is, we give people me and white supremacy, and we give them time, paid time to read the book, to do the journaling exercises, and to discuss the book with, we usually have a couple people start around the same time and do it together in pairs. But the whole organization did it in groups. They have to look at, videos that, like Crip Camp and some of those. So people get some understanding that this is not just a job, they're part of a movement. So we try to immerse people right away. And then part of the orientation is a one-on-one with me. And I explain, the open door policy. It's been kind of funny in a virtual environment. I had to learn different ways because I used to manage by walking around. Like if I could go talk to somebody, I didn't send an email, I'd go to their office. So that all changed. So now I'm doing things like every Friday I write weekend update, send an email out to everybody. And then I have office hours. They're usually hybrid. So most of the people are in the Triangle area, but we have people all over the state. So some people Zoom in and some people come in and, bring a lunch, or once in a while spring for some pizzas, and we just talk about things. And that has been really helpful these last couple of months because people have stuff on their minds, and I just think that I hope it doesn't sound egotistical. It's just because of the role that I have, that people want to know what's going on. They want that transparency. They want to know what I'm thinking about and what's going on. So those are some of the things that we do. And then we just do fun stuff like that people want to do. The last fun thing we did was like a dance and karaoke party. We've gotten together at a park and had exotic animals come in, like a 15-foot long snake and things like that. And people got to miss. So it's just like goofy fun, right? So that we can kind of be kids again. And it's a great equalizer. Like, there's no hierarchy there. We're all just, messing around with a great big snake, or, singing very badly. And nobody cares.
This is Marissa. I love that for you all. Liver Florence.
This is Liv. So when I joined Law New York, we had a DEI committee, and there were subcommittees that were for BIPOC, and an anti-racism caucus, which is fantastic. Like those are great to have. We didn't have one for disability. We didn't have one for LGBTQ. We don't have other ones either. And those are the ones that related the most to me. So I asked about that and was told, well, that'd be great. Do you want to start it? Go ahead. We love this. So I started up our subcommittees for the disability and neurodiversity, and for Pride New York, just like Law New York. And those two subcommittees have been doing well. We're doing presentations at our all staff meetings about disability etiquette, for example, like how we might interact with different clients, how to be respectful of each other, things that are well, we also have a DEI manager who is working very hard on making sure we continue to develop access and inclusion, although we are renaming her to the organizational access and professional development instead of DEI. So, and our subcommittees, DEI subcommittees, are now employee resource groups. But the work goes on at our place.
This is Marissa. I think the client etiquette piece is so important and interesting. And that's one of the things that for me, my lived experience is the most helpful. I think sometimes it's hard to think outside of the box when communications with clients aren't working. I think it can also be easy to be burnt out and not try any harder. Um, so I think that's really important, and I'm glad that you're doing that. Um, what do y'all like most about your roles? Why do you recommend getting experience at a nonprofit legal services organization, including during this time?
This is Florence. So I mean, for me, when it came to being a lawyer, I only saw myself as a public interest lawyer in the beginning. I didn't see any other pathway, and I conveniently ended up at CUNY Law in New York, which is known as a public interest law school. So that worked out. But I think even if someone might not be like I was and was like, all right, I'm working in the public interest or bust, like working at a legal services organization or a nonprofit is still a really valuable experience because I think it just shows you a different way of lawyering that you might not actually see in the private sector. I'm just using private sector for like another side of it. Because I did work in the private sector for a little bit at a private immigration law firm. And my style of lawyering and the way I want to work with clients and the attention that I want to give to my clients' other needs, so like in a more holistic way and things like that, it just didn't fit well with what a firm was trying to do. And, you know, I think that there are multiple ways to be a lawyer, but being a public interest lawyer really only happens in public interest spaces. So I would say that for that, it's definitely a worthwhile experience. And then if you have an issue or a cause that you were really passionate about personally, like going to work in that field for a little bit could also be really valuable. Like for me, immigration was of a very strong interest to me, so I chose that for a lot of reasons. And like I think consumer protection is awesome, but I would not necessarily go do that because I don't necessarily feel called to that, so to speak. But I think if you feel a calling towards an area, that could be a good inroads to working in public interest.
Liver, Virginia.
Well, and this is Virginia. I can say that I have really enjoyed working at the protection and advocacy organizations because we're cross disability, because there's so many different issues that we take on, and there's so many different strategies that we can use. So I've been able to do a lot of different things, starting from, doing intake as a law clerk on, there was a trivia game that they used to play at Disability Rights California, and it was like, which of these jobs has Virginia not had at the organization? And the answer was none of the above. So I had a lot of opportunities to do different things. And there's really nothing wrong with someone staying in the same job for decades. I'll just say it's not my style. I'm sort of like around the 10, 12 year mark. I feel like, um, you know, I've given it my best shot, and maybe it's someone else's turn to take a bite at the apple, and then I'll go try and develop something else. It seems like, I mean, I don't want the organization to be over identified with me or take on my strengths and weaknesses, right? So I think around 10, 12 years. And so I've been very fortunate that I've gotten to work at 3 different P&As. And what I've learned is, like the stuff you have to work with to try to make systemic change is different, but the issues people are facing are very, very similar everywhere you go.
Liv.
This is Liv. Virginia, I really respect what you just said about wanting to make sure the organization develops on their own, doesn't take on your strengths and weaknesses. That's pretty cool. So I have already kind of pitched what I like about my role. I like being able to sue creditors. I like being able to point at people who do fraud and say your contract is all messed up. But what I like working at a nonprofit legal service organization is that because we tend to have, or at least my place, we know that we have lower salaries than people who work in private interest. And to make up for that, there's just a lot of professional development opportunity. There's a lot of focus on mentorship. There's a lot of work-life balance. And there's something really kind of great about having access to the Practicing Law Institute. And I get paid to just watch as many CLEs as I want. So that's totally fine as part of my job because it's professional development. And I think the growth that I can achieve here as an attorney is just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the growth that I could have achieved working in government.
This is Marissa. Liv, I think it's really interesting that you talk about the work-life balance, if only because that is not a given in legal services, despite the lower salaries and everything else that comes with it. And I think the elephant in the room is how do we avoid burnout? And especially as disabled folks, right? Like we're being exposed to trauma. We are, having to work through ADHD or pain or what have you. So how do y'all avoid burnout?
Well, this is Virginia. I can take a stab at it. I'm probably the worst one to answer this question though, because like I said, there's not a lot of daylight between who I am and what I do for work. But I have been, I have like basic strategies that I've been really focused on these last couple of months, and some of them are so simple, but they help me. And one is like to notice like my nutrition, like did I drink any water today? Did I eat something green lately? Like, it matters to me. And this, the one I'm struggling with the most is like getting sleep. But taking walks outside where I'm not like looking at my phone, I don't have my earbuds in, I'm like listening to birds sing and stuff like that. It really helps me. I have a support dog and she walks with me. And I meditate every morning. I'm pretty good about doing it before I pick up my phone even. I meditate in the morning and I write in a gratitude journal. Every day I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And sometimes they're kind of mundane, but I come up with 3 things. So just, little things like that. And then just trying to find some time to be creative. That helps too.
Liver Florence.
This is Florence. I would say I definitely agree with a lot of what Virginia was just saying, like going to the basics, like of food, water. I've actually been sitting here thinking, like, man, it's been a long time since I had some water. But those things really do make a huge difference. Because I know for me, for the longest time, like I was just so consumed in my work, and not even because like, oh, that's what the work environment made me do. It was what I made myself do. I would be skipping meals and not drinking enough water and like all this type of stuff just because I was trying to get something done. And then I'm getting sicker and sicker with my health. And like, I definitely can't function like that while also being sick. So I had to really scale back a lot and just go back to like, okay, I need to make time for breaks. I need to step away from the computer every now and then. Like, I only check my email at certain points in the day. You know, I don't have notifications on my computer. I do miss stuff, but it's better than me constantly being bombarded with stuff. So little things like that. And I do work remotely, which has been helpful. And so whenever I'm able to, like, you know, getting some sort of movement in at home or like taking a nap on my lunch break, I'm still using it. So, you know, things like that.
Liv, do you have anything to add?
This is Liv. Anything that I add is just going to be praising my current organization further. If we work more than 70 hours in the 2 week period, because we're 35 hours a week, our supervisors will tell us, hey, are you feeling okay? Is your caseload too much? You're putting in a lot of work these past 2 weeks. So there's an entire culture at my organization. It leads from the top with attorneys saying, hey, I'm feeling a little bit burnt out. My supervisors will say that I'm feeling a little burnt out. I'm taking a day off. And then they do. So I'm just incredibly lucky that I work in a place that is so focused on that side of being an attorney.
This is Marissa. That's fantastic. My last question for all of you before I kick it to Q&A is what advice you have for disabled legal professionals who are looking for employment with a nonprofit legal services organization. And again, particularly in the context of this time.
This is Liv. We're hiring. If it's just sorry.
Let me pull up the website right now. This is
my advice honestly is to continue to network with other legal professionals, disabled legal professionals, and building out your friend group of disabled legal professionals. They'll know who's hiring, they know how it's like working there, how they are with reasonable accommodations, and they're a bit more forthright in general. So besides that, whether or not you want to disclose that you need accommodations in your interview or not, that is, I think, dependent on the legal services job you're trying to obtain.
Virginia?
Yeah, Liv, I would say that when people come to me for advice, that's one of the things that they ask about is, you know, to disclose or not to disclose. And it's such a personal decision. So, you know, I just ask questions and hope that the person that, you know, it leads them to what's true for them. Because I think what's important is to just like be clear what your why is, and go with that. And I think right now, what I would suggest to people is like find out how things are funded. It's kind of a precarious time, so that would be something that is important to go into it with your eyes open.
This is Marissa. I think one thing Liv said too is, you know, there are a lot of organizations that say a lot of fancy things, but ultimately, like Liv said, talk to other disabled legal professionals because we know what's going on behind the scenes and how things are really playing out. So yeah, sorry, go ahead, Florence.
this is Florence. No, it's okay. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, that's why I joined this organization, not trying to make a shameless plug. It just fits because I didn't know where other people were. Like I was going into these situations like doing what I felt like was winging it, and I was just getting very exhausted from it because I was honestly getting to a point where I was ready to just hang up the towel. Like, oh, I don't actually need these things. Like, I'll be able to work the way I used to. It's fine. Um, and like just seeing that there is such a strong community of disabled legal professionals is like so, it's been so reassuring to see. And for the context of legal services, just, and this is just my personal experience, the organizations that I have worked at, they are kind of similar to lives in that they don't have that information up front in the onboarding about like how to request reasonable accommodations, or like what different things do they offer in terms of accessibility and things of that nature. So like I would say, just when you're going into these organizations, keep that in mind, and like definitely gauge how much energy you're willing to put in to like pushing them to do what they're supposed to already be doing. Because I got caught in that a lot, where I'm like trying to make them see they're not following the law and things like that. And then I just get burnt out from that, like I was saying earlier. And then I might not even have what I need at the end. So sometimes it really is as simple as just being like, hey, I'm requesting reasonable accommodation. Here it is. You get their response. It's maybe not good. And then you just keep trying to go back and forth and not, you know, try to change the whole world, which is what I feel like sometimes. Because I don't want it to be like that for other people after me. But there's a time and a place, I think.
This is Marissa. I think a lot of us sometimes feel like the weight of the world is on our shoulders. And I think part of Indulpa is recognizing that it's not, and that you're not alone, and that we're here to tap in when it's your time to tap out, because everybody has a time when they need to tap out. Um, okay, I will open up for questions. Anybody have any questions? You're welcome to put it in the chat or raise your hand. Give everybody a second if they have questions. In the meantime, just a plug that if you need to reach out to Ndalpa, if you have questions or um, anything for further follow-up, info at ndlpa.org. And if you are not already a member of Ndalpa, we hope that you join. You can go to Ndalpa, ndlpa.org/join. It is a sliding scale, and we allow you to put $0 in if that's what you can afford. So we hope that you consider joining. Okay. I see one question in the chat from Harrison. Question for Florence. Any unique challenges or experiences that come with practicing immigration law with accommodations?
This is Florence. Yes. Uh, namely, um, how does USCIS, which stands for United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, is extremely unaccommodating for attorneys and legal representatives. I have been trying for like over a year now to figure out how I can request accommodations, who I could request accommodations from. And I have not had such luck. Everything they have about accommodations is applicant facing. So pretty much you would have to go to a USCIS office for a client's interview and then try to figure out accommodations there in real time, which is actually not practical and is why I have stopped going to interviews, which has affected my practice because when I'm applying for jobs and I'm like, I can do telephonic interviews, people are like, we don't want that. Understandably so, because they want somebody who can go with the client. But I also don't want to say, hey, the reason why I can't go with the client is because I can't sit in a room for 3+ hours and be able to function. So that was sarcasm, by the way. Sorry. It's been complicated because attending client interviews at USCIS has been a huge part of my practice. I don't go to court, so I don't really know what it looks like on that side of things. But I feel like the immigration courts are probably more accommodating just because you can file, motions requesting things, or they have more specific point people you can access. But with the field offices, you don't have a direct person you can contact to say like, hey, can I get an accommodation for the officer to take breaks, like a 10-minute break every hour? Instead, you go into the interview and you hope that the officer needs to use the bathroom so that everybody can get a break. Otherwise, everybody just sits there. And for asylum interviews, it's even worse because those interviews can be like 6 hours. And you can't bring food into the building, can't bring water, your own water, into the building. So it's been a lot, having to contend with that. So that's the main thing for me that's been affecting my practice.
This is Marissa. That is a lot.
Yeah, I I figured this is Florence. I figured I would answer honestly because it's a very valid question.
Any other questions that folks have? Okay. Well, hearing nothing, I want to thank our amazing panel, Virginia, Liv, and Florence. Thank you all for joining today. Um, and I hope you all consider joining Indulpa, and that we will see you at our next event. Our next panel will be on April 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern, and that will be with legal academia. Um, so that should be fun. And our member meeting, our annual membership meeting, is on April 8th at 8 p.m. Eastern. We hope that you attend our membership meeting, where you'll get to meet folks who are running for the board positions that we've posted about, as well as hear updates from Indulpa about where we've gone and where we're going. So thanks, everybody, and we hope you have a great night. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.